Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's spoiler review for Star Wars Episode VIII The Last Jedi. If you haven't seen The Last Jedi yet, you will not want to watch this video. This is your one last major spoiler warning. Make it very clear there are going to be tons of spoilers here on out. I did a spoiler-free reaction video right after I saw this, so you can go watch that if you haven't seen the movie yet. I'll put a link to that in the description below, and once you have seen the movie, you can come back and watch this. But if you haven't seen the movie, now's the time to back out. So, in my initial reaction to The Last Jedi, I said that this was my second favorite Star Wars film behind Empire Strikes Back, but I wasn't, I was tentative about that because it was right after I've seen the movie, and so right after you see a movie for the first time, you're really sort of pumped or whatever, and sometimes you let that sort of get to your head. So I had time to think about it a bit more, to ponder on it, and I saw the second time, and I can solidify now that this most definitely is my second favorite Star Wars film behind The Empire Strikes Back. Now, one thing, I mentioned this in my spoiler-free review, you have to take with a grain of salt, is I don't put the Star Wars films on as high as a pedestal as a lot of people do. I do consider myself a Star Wars fan, but I take them, look at them objectively, and I see that they all have faults. To me, The Empire Strikes Back is the only true masterpiece in the Star Wars franchise, really. It's the only one that I think is almost a perfect masterpiece. The original Star Wars, now referred to as A New Hope, to me that was it felt way too much like a sort of 40s or 30s serial. It was a lot of melodrama, which I think does not age very well, and it was more of this kind of, I don't know, hokey sort of action, and not the strong character stories that the later movies would have. And I'm not saying I hate A New Hope, but I'm just saying, it was actually always been my least favorite of the original trilogy before, the prequels or anything else came out. So it was always something that I didn't look on as fondly as many other people. And then there's Return of the Jedi, which I did enjoy a lot more, but looking at it with a critical eye, you can actually see there was a lot of parts of that movie that were lazily written. They didn't put as much effort as they should have, and it seems like they were being a bit hasty to try to get it out. And some people pointed out that Harrison Ford didn't really want to do that movie, and so he was kind of phoning in his performance. You can kind of tell that, and some of the, I don't know, it doesn't hold up as well. I think the things that work best about the movie is the Luke and Vader scenes. That's pure gold. If that all the movie is, I'd put it up right there with Empire. But unfortunately, we get this other stuff. We get another Death Star run, which is pretty much the same thing we saw in the first one. So that's why I don't hold that movie up that high. And there's the prequels, and the prequels are the prequels. I mean, that's all I need to say about the prequels. And then there's The Force Awakens, which I think was borrowed way too heavily from A New Hope. You can watch my review for Force Awakens, and when I describe the plot of Force Awakens, and I also describe the plot of The New Hope at the same time. And I'm able to do it because there's so much, it's unbelievable how much it borrows from. And that's not to say it has no original aspects. It has a lot of original aspects, like the characters of Rey, Finn, and Kylo Ren, which I think Kylo Ren worked very well. But, it was too much of it borrowed from A New Hope, and it was relying a bit too much on the original trilogy. And then Rogue One is Rogue One. It's kind of not really a part of the actual saga. It's a Star Wars story, and it's kind of, again, it relied too much of A New Hope. It was trying to be oh, this is what happened right before New Hope, and I think that premise is kind of dumb. But it was a good movie. I like the war in it and stuff, but the characters are kind of weak. So that's why I like Last Jedi better than all those films, because I'm not saying Last Jedi is a masterpiece, like I wouldn't put it up there with Empire, but I certainly liked it better than those other films for the reasons I just stated. And now, with The Last Jedi, I think why it's so good is because it builds off of the original aspects of Force Awakens, like the characters of Rey, Kylo Ren, and explores them more, and it does it so in this film where it feels like its own original film. It doesn't feel like a rehash of the way The Force Awakens was. And I know there's some critics out there who are trying to like say, oh, well, Last Jedi is kind of rehashed too, because that scene with Rey and Luke is kind of similar to Yoda and Luke in Empire Strikes Back, and then Kylo Ren and Rey in the elevator where Rey's trying to turn him is kind of like the way Luke tried to turn Vader. But like, there were similar aspects to it, sure. But to me, there's nothing wrong with that. To me, that's great. To me, The Last Jedi found the exact balance of callbacks to the originals, but not too much of it to make it feel like it's not its own movie. Force Awakens, way too much. The entire structure of Force Awakens was exactly A New Hope. Like, it's just ridiculous, like beat for beat, and you can get really specific too about, Android in the desert, and like just beat for beat, and the Mentor dying. It's like beat for beat for beat for beat for beat for beat for beat. Now again, I'm not saying it's a carbon copy. There are original elements of Force Awakens, which is why I didn't hate Force Awakens. I liked Force Awakens, but it was beat for beat for beat for beat A New Hope, which Last Jedi, like if you try to say it's beat for beat Empire, it just doesn't fix. Like, oh, they're on there's the rebel base being attacked on the planet that's white, but it's salt, not snow, but let's forget that. And, they have which are AT-ATs, attacking whatever, but they don't have the different starfighters coming out to wrangle cables around the... Like, you have to stretch it. Like, it doesn't work for... And there'd be a lot of beats in The Last Jedi that you would have to leave out entirely in your synopsis. And plus you would have to conflate, and you'd have to throw in Return of the Jedi in there. So it just doesn't work. Whereas with Force Awakens, you can do beat for beat with New Hope with leaving very little. Very little. You can grab all the major plot points for The Force Awakens and thrust them into A New Hope, where with Last Jedi you can't do that at all. So for the critics, it's even like compared, I think, is outrageous. It's ridiculous. In fact, I would say, and I'm about to get into the criticism of Last Jedi, because the criticism of Last Jedi has more to do with it being too original, but most of the other people who are upset with this movie are saying not staying true to Star Wars and not, being consistent with what has been established before. So it's kind of the opposite argument of Force Awakens. So yeah, I just put that to rest. But now, let me talk about, because I was caught off guard. I was surprised by there was a backlash of this film. I would say, this is just an educated guess, but this is the way it appears to me to be. An vocal minority who absolutely couldn't stand this film. And I would say, like, the majority of people probably don't like the film as much as I do. They love the film, but they have more issues with it than I do. Like, I think the majority of what I'm saying would give it like a 7 or 8 out of 10, be like, good, but it had some issues, whereas some of these issues they're talking about I was fine with, but I'll get into that more later on. But there is a vocal minority who I would say they're in minority, but they hate, like they say is one of the worst Star Wars films, is worse than Attack of the Clones, is worse, almost as bad as Phantom Menace, but they're comparing it to the worst of the worst and saying that this is horrible and it sucked. Now, before I get into that, let me say that this video isn't about me attacking anyone's opinions. I want to make that very clear. If you feel that way, if you feel that The Last Jedi is one of the worst Star Wars movies, you hated it was an insult to you as a Star Wars fan, you're entitled to that feelings, and I'm not trying to say that you're wrong. And actually, I can really see where people are coming from with this, even though I personally don't feel that way at all. But I can kind of see their point of view. So I want to make it clear, I'm not saying, this video isn't to say this is why you're wrong. This video is actually to say, well, this is my opinion, and this is why I feel the way I feel. You may feel a different way. You're certainly entitled to that opinion, but this is why I have my opinion. And this is why those certain complaints that other people may have, I don't think bother me, and I have certain reasons, specific reasons why they don't. So, alright, so, to me it gets to sort of the difference between expectations and good storytelling, what you expect. Because whenever I go into any film, I always try to bank my expectations at the door. In fact, with this film, The Last Jedi in particular, I purposely avoided all trailers. I can't remember what movie I saw. I went to the theater and saw a movie where they played the trailer. Oh, it was Thor Ragnarok. So I couldn't hide from it. So I have seen it once or twice, but I wasn't like one of those people who go online, watch the trailer like a shitload of times, and then go watch a shitload of videos that analyze every single frame, freeze frame it, and be like, oh, what could this mean? So, I mean, again, nothing against people who want to do that. I just made the decision for this film that I was going to try to remain as ignorant of it going in, so I could judge it for on its own merits, and not judging it for based off of other things. And more to the point, I think, with these specific complaints, between the years that Force Awakens was released and this movie released, there are a lot of Star Wars theory videos and speculation online of what's going to happen. And that's another thing I purposely avoided. In fact, I watched a couple of those, so I am somewhat aware of what these videos are saying and what these articles are saying. I just don't find it interesting. To me, it's like people were speculating a lot and making their own assumptions and building their own expectations off of things that didn't necessarily exist in the movies. And they'd watch these other videos, so they build the theories off of these other theory videos, and they build all these assumptions. And to me, a lot of them were very presumptuous. Would take a frame of the movie and be like, oh, so this means this or whatever. And I just don't like that kind of theorizing. And I know those familiar with my channel might think I'm being a bit hypocritical, because I was well known for theorizing about Game of Thrones and making theory videos about Game of Thrones where I'd theorize and stuff. But I think there was a huge difference. In fact, if you're familiar with my Game of Thrones series, you know some of the more ridiculous theories got me upset too, and I was not on board with some of the more outrageous theories in Game of Thrones. But with Game of Thrones, it was more of, you have a long set of novels and a long running TV show to go off of. Where with Star Wars, I feel not even, because most of these theories were just based off of Force Awakens, so you have 1.5 hour movie to go off of. And to me, that's a huge difference. To me, so they're filling in a lot of blanks with a lot of things that maybe non-canon material, or just, picking up on misconceptions because they're over-analyzing just one movie, which is quite different from, say, something like Game of Thrones, which has 5 humongous books of material, actual books, not the Star Wars books, those aren't canon again. But, and again, they're not even going off of that, they're just going off Force Awakens. But again, and plus hours and hours of TV show to go off of. And I think the same is true with Star Trek. I think, with Discovery, people getting a bit crazy with the theories too, which I thought was a bit ridiculous. A couple of theories I thought were okay, but again, Star Trek is another thing where you have tons and tons. You have tons, I think I calculated somewhere, I read somewhere, it was 671 hours of stuff to watch with Star Trek, if you count all of it. And with Star Wars, you just have, 8 movies, or 9 if you count Rogue One. I don't count Clone Wars or the Ewoks or any of that. I would never count that. I don't think anyone should. So you basically just have the 7 movies. Sorry, 8 if you count Rogue One. And again, most of them aren't even relevant. Most of the ones are relevant is just Force Awakens. So they would just overanalyze Force Awakens and come up with these, just ridiculous theories. And again, I'm not bashing anyone who enjoyed doing that. If you enjoy doing that, more power to you. I'm just saying, from my perspective, I did not find these videos interesting at all. So I wasn't on board. So basically, this whole year before Last Jedi came out, I tried to sort of not get into all this speculating, not get into spoilers, not get into the trailers, and try to just wait and just be Star Wars free until the movie is actually released, and then judge the movie on its own merits and based off of what I've seen in The Force Awakens. And I think, honestly, and again, maybe I'm wrong, maybe you guys disagree, but it does seem to me that a lot of the complaints from the people who didn't like Last Jedi are based in the area of the speculation, that they had certain expectations, whether it was based off of these theory videos or not, that were not met by the movie, so they're mad at the movie for not being what they expected it to be. Now, even if I do think a lot of it does have to do with these theory videos and other, just over-analyzing stuff, which I'll get into shortly, but even if it isn't, even has nothing to do with it, even if someone's like me and was staying away from all that stuff, but still was disappointed, I think it still has to do with checking one's own expectations, because that happens to me sometimes, and I always try to check my own expectations. Certainly, even in this movie, there are times I'll get into where my initial reaction was to be like, "What?" But then I realize if I think of it and I set my expectations on what I think should happen aside, and think of it on what is actually good for the movie, it actually works. And it's the same with Game of Thrones. Like, as I said, I love to do tons of theories and stuff, and obviously, a lot of my theories are wrong, but whenever they're wrong, it doesn't mean I don't like what I see, because if they do something different, but they do it really good in a way that I'm not expecting, and even though, I'm a bit disappointed that my expectations weren't met, they did something else that was even better and actually worked for the story, so I'm okay with that. So, I think, and I do get I don't want to put words in anyone's mouths, but I do get the impression that a lot of these people were super upset. It's mainly because they wanted their expectations to be met, and their expectations were not met. But anyway, enough of the vague talk. Let me get into more specifics. So I'll go down the line, because there's a lot of complaints people have. And I want to say, I was really caught off guard by this complaints. The first one I got was comment on my video saying that they thought this was the worst Star Wars movie, and then I got another comment, but then a couple days later, I saw, the internet was freaking flooded. Tons of YouTube videos, tons of articles, people saying, "Oh, this sucks," and apparently there's a campaign, people downvoting it on Rotten Tomatoes to make sure it has a low fan score, and then some people look at that and be like, "Oh, see, the fans didn't like it," which I don't think, honestly, that is representative, because general audiences love this because they didn't have expectations. Anyway, let me get into some specifics. First of all right, let me talk about Snoke, because this is a big complaint that a lot of people have with Snoke, because that was the one thing that people love to speculate. I saw theory videos everywhere. Oh, Snoke this, Snoke that. He's actually Dark Plagueis, and he's that, and blah blah blah. And this movie is kind of saying that, doesn't really matter who he is. Now, I'll be perfectly honest. I have an issue with this myself, but only a slight one, and it's not the main one. A lot of people are really upset and saying it's misusing Snoke. In fact, I heard several critics refer to this as trashing or disregarding the setup for Snoke in The Force Awakens. But I'm sorry, I'm going to have to very strongly disagree with that. There was no setup for Snoke in The Force Awakens. All the setup for Snoke was done in the theory videos and the overanalyzing. The Force Awakens itself, he's just this hologram guy. He appears in one scene, and that's it. It's not foreshadowing him to be a major character. It's just the audience assuming and theorizing and blah, based off of, oh, he's going to be another emperor, blah, blah, blah. I heard this one person refer to, oh, he has this, the way his face is, he has a scar on the face, so Scar has the story to tell, so that's setting up for the story to be told with him, and we don't get the story, so that's disappointing. if I watch like a random action movie, let's say Steven Seagal movie, and there's a villain who has a scar on his face, does that mean I'm expecting to get his backstory? Do I expect there to be a sequel based off of him that tells his backstory, to say where is he from, how did he get the scar? No, it doesn't mean that. Just because Snoke has a freaking scar doesn't mean you're entitled to get more backstory with this character. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. And what we saw in The Force Awakens, if you just judge the movie off the movie itself, is not setting him up to be anything. It's just saying this is another character who's kind of like the Emperor, who's Kylo Ren's sort of mentor. And who started the First Order. So, I mean, with that, you kind of want to know more about it, but is it necessary? Is it required? Is it to be expected? Are you entitled to get a backstory for him? I don't think so. But, you know, that's just me. That's the way I look at it. I mean, would it have been nice if they went into a bit more detail on him? It depends. I'd say if it worked for the story, and if it didn't, I think Rian Johnson, the director of the film, had said something in an interview which I could not possibly agree with more, where he was talking about, if he was thinking about this, he was saying if, Snoke, in the scene where he's talking to Rey and Rey and Kylo Ren, if he was just like took a few minutes out to talk about how he's really Dark Plagueis, and he's just throwing that out there. He's not saying he's really Dark Plagueis, but if, for example, he took a moment out and said to talk about how he's really Dark Plagueis, what would that contribute to the story? Like, Rey doesn't even know who Dark Plagueis is. She'd be like, oh, that's fascinating. So you're actually this person I don't know about, so why do I even care? What does that have to do with what's going on with the story? And I could not agree with him more. I think that is dead right. I think if there's a way to make it all relevant to the story, what's going on, then sure, go ahead. But does that mean it has to do it, and if we don't get a backstory? Because this is where I think, I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound rude, but this is where I think these Star Wars fans are coming off as entitled. Because again, if you watch any other movie, not even Steven Seagal, or any other movie like Die Hard or anything, you're not feeling entitled to a backstory for a main villain. The only reason people are doing this is because it's Star Wars. And they like to overanalyze it, and they like to get more. And I understand, because I'm the same way with like Star Trek. I love it when they explore stuff more. But I don't think just because they don't doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. Especially with the Borg, they explored that too much in Voyager. But anyway, I'm digressing. And also, the thing about Snoke is, if you're going to compare him to the Emperor, which I think is the comparison being made, I mean, obviously it's the runner of the Empire, he's called Supreme Chancellor or whatever, basically the Emperor, then you have to keep in mind that we didn't get that much of the Emperor in the original Star Wars trilogy. He was in one scene of The Empire Strikes Back, and then he was in Return of the Jedi a fair bit, but I would say pretty much the same amount of time Snoke was in Last Jedi, maybe slightly longer. But basically, we didn't get that much more of the Emperor than we got of Snoke. I mean, there's also the prequels explored the Emperor's backstory and told us who he was, but I think that was one of the issues with the prequels, to be honest. It was focused a bit too much on Palpatine and not enough on Vader. Whereas I think Rian Johnson made the very smart decision to be like, look, who's the villain? Who's the main antagonist of this series? Is it Snoke? No, it's not Snoke. It's Kylo Ren. So that's where the focus needs to be. The focus needs to be on Kylo Ren, and Snoke needs to be sort of a supporting character who helps further his story, if you know what I'm saying. And I think that was a brilliant story-making decision. I think this is another thing that comes into complaint several times I'll get into, where I think you have to understand the facets of storytelling when you have so many characters. And a lot of movies, like a lot of these comic book ensemble movies, can fall into this trap where they have too many characters and they don't juggle them very well, and they focus too much on everyone. They don't they don't focus enough on specific characters, and the whole movie seems to fall apart. And this movie, I think, was brilliant because it knew who to focus on, who wasn't, who actually is important for the story, what's going to push the story forward. Let's focus on that. Having Snoke go on about how he's Dark Plagueis does nothing to push the story forward. I'm sorry, but it's true. And again, he's not the main focus. Just like, the Emperor wasn't the main focus of the original Star Wars trilogy. He was just, the leader, Vader's master, or whatever. And when he wasn't relevant to the story anymore, he got thrown out. When he was relevant, he was there. And I think it's the same with Snoke. I think he served a purpose, and I love the fact that they killed him. I think it was very unexpected. Worked really well for the movie, for the storytelling of this movie, which as a writer, you're telling a story of this movie, and it switched the focus more on Kylo Ren. So, plus it's making things more original, as I said. It's not being a carbon copy of the prequels, of the original trilogy, because it's setting up the situation where, in the next movie, Kylo Ren is going to be the Supreme Chancellor. He's not going to have an Emperor, and we never really got that with Vader. And so that really changes the dynamic going forward. And plus the whole, subversion of, we're going to mirror... And this is what I'm talking about, what people were saying, it's kind of like the scene in Return of the Jedi where Luke tries to turn Vader good. It's like that, but in fact, totally the opposite, because they subvert your expectations. They go in the complete opposite direction. They have Ren kill Snoke, and then instead of being, I'm going to be good, he wants to team up with Rey to be evil and take over the galaxy. That was brilliant. I'll get into that scene later on, because that's one of my favorite scenes in the entire Star Wars franchise. I loved it so much. But regardless, what they did to Snoke worked, and I don't think I didn't see him as a disappointment, as many other people doing. I think we know as much about him as we need to know to serve the story, and that's all that matters. Then it is possible that we will get to know more about him in Episode 9. Even though he's dead, we could still learn his backstory. If it's relevant, then it'll come up, and fine. Great. If it doesn't, I won't really care. So anyway, let's move on to the other thing a lot of people had issues with, and that's Rey's parents. Now, this is the thing, I'll be honest, when I was first watching this in the movie theater, and the big reveal came that, your parents are nothing, I was a bit ticked off, too, because this, I think, has more to do, this is more foreshadowed in the actual Force Awakens itself, and not as dependent on all the supplement material Snoke was. And it's really funny, because I was watching this YouTube critic, and he was saying, the Rey's parents is kind of excusable, but the Snoke thing was set up in the movie itself, which is actually not true. It's the exact opposite. As I said, they did nothing to set up Snoke in the Force Awakens, but with Rey's parents, they definitely did. They had that scene where she touched the lightsaber, and she got the visions, and of course, she's been wondering it was a big plot point. They were even playing it out for the majority of this movie is who my parents are making. So they're building it to be a big question, and then they find out they're nobodies. Now, I don't know. I'm kind of confused on why a lot of people are pissed off about this, because even with the theory videos, even with the speculations, people wondering, the option of her parents being nobodies was always there. There was always one of the options. So it seems to me like they should have expected that possibility and been prepared. So why are you disappointed when you knew this was a possibility? It seems to me that they want her parents to be Luke. I remember, I'll be honest, when I first saw Force Awakens 2, I was like, her father better be Luke, otherwise it would be bullshit. But so I had my expectations in that regard, and maybe that's why I was slightly disappointed when they first reveal, your parents are nobodies. I'm like, really? They're nobodies? But if you look at it, once I had time to think about it and let the film sit with me, it was the perfect thing for the film, and it actually builds on the whole theme of the film, which I think a lot of people aren't seeing. And I think it was done extremely well. That's kind of the whole point, because some of these people who were against Rey being Luke's daughter were saying that then that would turn the story into Star Wars story into an oligarchy. It's all about one specific family, and this family is important, the rest of the galaxy doesn't matter. And so by doing the opposite, by saying your parents are nobodies, they're actually they're taking the story into the opposite direction. Rather than saying the whole galaxy is about this one family, they're saying, no, it's not about this one family. It's about the whole galaxy. And that it's not because of her lineage or any BS like that. She just happens to have the Force, and anyone could. And this is made crystal clear in the ending scene, which I absolutely love, where they have the kid who's, being inspired by stories about Luke, and he takes the broom and has it go to him, whatever, so it shows he has Force powers too. To me, this is in keeping with the theme of The Force Awakens, is that the Force is awakening throughout the entire galaxy. Maybe it's starting with Rey, because she has like the highest concentration of, although they don't use this word in the film, it's kind of implied, metachlorians. Poison! But anyway, that maybe she just has these special Force abilities, and it's not because of her lineage or anything. Now, I know someone mentioned, I saw someone in the video comment section mention, oh, well, it's no different than Anakin, and someone else went off the wire, no! Anakin was like a divine creation of metachlorians, so it's totally different. Well, does anyone actually like that explanation for Anakin? I don't think so. But setting that aside, yeah, even if she's not a divine, creation of metachlorians, it's still, I would still argue it's still similar. It's in the regards that it just, it happened. Maybe the divine, metachlorian count came through her birth instead of just, spontaneous whatever. I don't know. It's not the same, but I would still say that this story is telling us that the Force is awakening throughout the galaxy, and random, ordinary, regular people are getting the Force, and anyone could be a Jedi, or maybe not anyone, but it's happening all over the place. It's not just isolated to a royal family of Skywalkers, and I love that. I think that's amazing. I think it has really great implications for the Star Wars franchise at large, and no, I don't think it's betraying anything that's been established. I don't think it's contradicting anything that's been established. Certainly not. It's just taking it in a different direction than what many fans expected, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, except for the people who let their expectations get in the way of watching a good story. So that kind of feeds into the next complaint I heard, is that many people, even people who like the film, are kind of stating Rian Johnson took this film after J.J. Abrams, and he's like, nah, fuck that, I'm just gonna do my own thing. I'm gonna purposely subvert the things that Abrams set up, and I'm gonna do the exact opposite and not care. I could not disagree with that sentiment more, and if you listen to interviews from Rian Johnson, he specifically says that it is not the case. He talks about how he was sort of, Abrams wasn't directly involved in writing the script with him, but they were sort of they were aware, they weren't purposely, a lot of people are talking oh, this is Rian Johnson coming in and going fuck you, Abrams, I'm gonna do whatever the hell I like, which is, cannot be further from the truth. And then other people are saying, oh, so Abrams would come in, he's gonna undo everything Rian Johnson did. Well, fuck you for undoing what I do, I'm gonna undo what you do. That is totally not gonna happen. In fact, I think what I'm hoping for with Episode 9 is that Abrams is very good at yes and. It's like a theater term or improv term, yes and. It's like when you say, oh, I'm an astronaut. Yes, and you're also a farmer. So you're astronaut farmer. So I think that Abrams needs to do that. He needs to be, if he actually does do what some of these hardcore fans are hoping, and being undoing what's done in this film, I will think Episode 9 sucks. The only hope I have for it, if he yes ands it, if he's like, okay, you took it in this direction, so now I'm going to build off that, but take it in my direction. If you see what I'm saying. But, overall, I will say, after watching this film compared to Force Awakens, I'm a bit disappointed that Rian Johnson isn't directing Episode 9. And I'm not really looking forward to Abrams going back to Episode 9, because I am a bit fearful that he will try to undo some of what's done in this film. But hopefully he will yes and it. But I'm more fearful that he'll go back to just copying Star Wars like he did in The Force Awakens, and we'll just get another bland rehash with Episode 9, which I hope he doesn't do. And I'm actually looking more forward to Rian Johnson's original trilogy, because apparently he's doing a Star Wars trilogy after this that's not based on the Skywalkers anyway. So maybe it will piss less people off because there's not traditional characters that he's betraying or whatever bullshit they're complaining about. So I'm actually, maybe that would be, received better. So I'm actually looking a bit more forward to that. But, with The Last Jedi, I really don't see, and you listen to interviews, he talks about this a bit more, on how he's not like purposely subverting or taking things in a different direction than what Abrams intended. He just looked at where the setup was and thought, well, what's the best way to tell the story with the setup? And so that's what he did, and that's what worked. And the fact that it didn't go with people's expectations, I think, has nothing to do with like subverting, like purposely subverting and going against what Abrams. So I defy that. I defy that attitude that some people have. I heard some YouTube people. I think they're dead wrong on that one. This is one place where I'm not going to say, oh, it's a matter of opinion. No, you're wrong. That is not the case. That is not what Rian Johnson did with Force Awakens. With Last Jedi. Sorry, but that's true. Anyway, so let's get in and talk about Luke Skywalker, because this is another big complaint a lot of people had. A lot of people had that, he's acting completely out of character. This isn't a new Luke Skywalker I know and love. He's a totally different character. Now, this part of it, like this particular complaint, I'm not going to sort of argue against as such, because if you have that viewpoint, then I can kind of see where you're coming from. I'm not going to try to tell you you're wrong or anything like that, or even bring up evidence and say, oh, that's not true. But I'll just say that I didn't get that feeling personally, because I thought it was explained in the movie pretty well that a lot of time has passed between Return of the Jedi and where we see him now. So I think it's totally like this gradual change in character, I think makes total sense to me. And I think it's great that Johnson is taking this into a place you don't expect. And it's funny, and I'm going to, digress a bit here, but another interview with Rian Johnson, he was talking about how he purposely, when he wrote the script, it's not like he sat down and purposely tried to avert expectations, because this film does that in spades. It avert expectations, but he says that wasn't his intention. His intention was just to tell a good story. So it's not like he was trying to, what do people expect? I'll do the exact opposite to troll them, haha. I mean, that wasn't the case at all. And I think if you watch the movie and you see how well the story works, you can definitely see that is the case. And the other thing was saying is that when he wrote this film, Force Awakens was still being made. Or, it was in post-production phase, just about to hit the theaters. So he wasn't aware of any of these theory videos or any of this bullcrap. So he wasn't purposely trying to piss off certain fans. It's just, this is what he did. We thought would tell a good story, and I totally agree. But anyway, back to Luke Skywalker. I can kind of see, for Luke, they're not relying on the theories as much, they're more looking at the original trilogy and the kind of character he was. I heard, watch some video where they showed specific clips from Return of the Jedi and be like, see, he would never do that. But people change, people evolve over time, and for me personally, and again, this is just my personal opinion, I don't think any of the changes in Luke are so drastic to be unrealistic. I personally buy them, and the thing that people complain about the most is the him trying to kill Kylo Ren. But watching that movie for a second time, I think that they explained this really well. He said, I had a moment of weakness because I saw that he was already taken over by Snoke. He'd already been corrupted by Snoke. So just think about this for a moment. This is a guy who probably has post-traumatic, symptoms over his experiences and the wars we saw in the original trilogy, and his experience with Vader. I mean, Vader cut his freaking arm off, and in that case, Vader was his father, so eventually overcame him and whatever, and said, "You're still good in you," but he knew there was no good in the Emperor. The Emperor was outright evil. So it would be natural for him to have this fear of history repeating itself, which of course it did, so that fear was justified. So I totally buy it. And the fact that it was just a moment of weakness. Like, if you see that flashback from Kylo Ren's perspective of Luke, like, looking all, like, angry and going, and killing him. If they were saying that is how it happened, then I would be on board with that's bullshit. That's not Luke's character. But you get Luke's perspective, and it makes a lot more sense. It wasn't him, like, being all angry and mad and, oh, I'm going to kill you. It's just like he was afraid. He had a moment of weakness. And I think it makes, in this whole film, is sort of building that his main fear is of the dark side taking over again, which I think is a totally natural fear to have, given his experiences in the original trilogy. So the fact that he would have one brief moment of weakness where he turned on a lightsaber but didn't realize what he was doing, a mistake, and turn it off, but the damage had already been done, makes total sense to me. I completely buy it. But, you know, again, that is just me. That's just me. And also, I think, and this is getting back to, like, Rian Johnson not, like, going, fuck you to The Force Awakens. So I think the stuff with Luke actually builds perfectly off of what was established in The Force Awakens. I think he saw that Force Awakens script and it's like, oh, this is where you're going with it, Abrams. So I'm going to build right off of your setup and follow you to your conclusion. I think this is exactly what he did here. Because if you look at it, and Force Awakens is sort of foreshadowing the thing with Kylo Ren, where you get his backstory, where the temple was burned down and he turned evil when, you know, Luke was training people and he was disheartened, he went into hiding. And so it makes total sense that he would have this attitude that the Jedi, this is all a failure. Because to me, I don't think that's even news. That was pretty much already established in The Force Awakens, that Luke had this attitude. That's why he went into hiding in the first place. And some critics saying, oh, I don't buy that Luke would hide from the galaxy or whatever. And I'm like, but that's already been established. That's already happened in Force Awakens. Why are you blaming this movie for something that's already been established? And I love, like, this line that Luke gives when Rey, it's like, come back with me to rebellion. I love the line Luke gives. He's like, what, you think I went and hid on, like, the hardest place to find in the entire galaxy for no reason whatsoever? And that is a very good point. I think he needs to say this to the critics. You think he went and hid in the hardest place to find an entire galaxy for no reason? No, he did it because he doesn't want to be involved anymore. He doesn't believe in the Jedi. And I think this movie did a really good job of explaining why that is. I totally bought it. I thought it was completely consistent for his character. I know people are going to come at me with Mark Hamill didn't think it was consistent with the character. And, you know, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with Mark Hamill, but I will say he did sort of, I wouldn't say come around, but he's not as critical now after making the film as he was when he was first making it, so he was sort of adjusted to the idea. But regardless, like, I think the film did a good job of exploring this aspect of Luke, and what he does in the end was absolutely amazing. And again, I'll talk about the Luke and Rey scenes. Absolutely loved them. I thought they were amazing. I thought they all worked really well, and it all built up to the ending scene where Luke comes and sort of astral projects. And I gotta talk about Luke and Yoda. I don't think no one's complained about this. I don't think. I haven't heard it yet, and for good reason. This scene was amazing, and it's such a great way, because if you think, like, my first, like, gut reaction to seeing Yoda was like, oh no, another shameless cameo from an original trilogy character, blue blue blue. But then you see the scene and, like, my eyes are streaking with tears, because that was such a perfect use of Yoda. It felt like a scene right out of the original trilogy. They recaptured the feeling with Luke and Yoda, and just the way it was, like, the gleeful Yoda. It wasn't like the prequel Yoda where he's like all serious general, and it wasn't like Return of the Jedi where he's just like, I'm gonna die. It's more the sort of gleeful type of Yoda that we loved in Empire, and I just love that counterbalance with Luke. And so that scene is just amazing. It is just, and I think personally, I mean, again, people might think I'm being hypocritical because I love to overanalyze things like Game of Thrones. But even then, I don't overanalyze it too much. And even with Game of Thrones and Star Trek and stuff, I'll say sometimes people are overanalyzing and reading too much into things. And the thing with Yoda, bringing down the lightning strike to burn a tree, people were like, oh, so does that mean these Force ghosts can come and bring down the lightning strike to kill Kylo Ren? Does that mean they can show up in the First Order and destroy a ship? And like, you're overthinking it. Just, he blew up a tree. Just accept it and move on. Jesus Christ. But I don't know. And I don't think that's hypocritical of me. But anyway, whatever. So, and yeah, that scene was amazing. And I didn't catch it the first time, but when he was talking about, like, Luke's like, oh, you're going to burn the books? And Yoda's like, oh, page turners they are not. That's hilarious. Love that scene. But again, I didn't catch it the first time that that Rey actually had the books. And they revealed this at the end, and I didn't catch that the first time because it's a very brief scene. Like, I had to be looking, I was like specifically looking for it because I heard someone mention it in a review, and I was like, oh, okay, they're the books. Rey does have them. And so that when Yoda says, oh, Rey has everything she needs, that was kind of a sly way of saying she has the books. That's very, very clever. I really enjoyed that. And the whole thing with Luke, like, oh my god, that scene at the end with Luke and Kylo Ren was absolutely, like, it brought tears to my eyes. It was absolutely amazing. It was done so well. The one sort of issue I will say I did have with Luke's storyline and with this film is the Luke dying. That did seem kind of, I don't know, like they try to explain like the astral projection thing, and again some people are bitching about this. Oh, this hasn't been established. Blah, blah, blah. Who cares? But anyway, the thing that kind of bothered me about this is that Luke dying. Like, I get it that he's like it was so much like energy use that would took it all out of him and he died, which is why he hasn't done it before. But it seemed to me kind of why, I don't know, why did he not just show up there if the whole point of if he was going to die anyway? I suppose it's the point of like faking Kylo Ren out to make him think he was there to stall for time, which is basically what he did. But still, it does make me feel like, I don't know, why fake him out and say, oh, Luke's not actually dead, he's alive, and then he's dead. I don't know. I didn't like that aspect to it. I don't know. We'll see. Actually, this is one thing I wouldn't mind if Abrams undid. I wouldn't mind if in episode 9 we see Luke pop back to life and they come up. They can make up any excuse to be like, here I am again. I've rebuilt my midichlorians or whatever. So if they did that, I wouldn't mind. But yeah, see, because that was the only sort of slight issue. But still, overall, I think that whole thing with Luke Skywalker was amazing. Oh, and let me talk about, this is some people, like, I watched so many YouTube videos of people bitching about, like, how when Luke first gets the lightsaber from Rey, which is the very end of The Force Awakens, he takes it and chucks it over his shoulder. And this is where people were saying, oh, Rian Johnson's purposely, like, undoing. Abrams purposely set it up so that he'd be all happy and he'd take the lightsaber and go like, oh, we'll train you, Rey. But Rian Johnson, big meanie he is, came in and was like, no, I'm gonna have him throw this over his shoulder just for laughs and so people can laugh, ha ha ha. But it's really dumb and it doesn't fit with anything. Totally wrong. You're completely wrong. First of all, like, it kind of annoys me that people are overanalyzing this one thing. He throws it over his shoulder. When I saw the film, I was like, oh, okay, here you are. I was a bit shocked, but I didn't think much of it, and I moved on. I didn't realize people were going to be so, like, fixated on this one thing. Well, maybe he shouldn't have turned it over his shoulder. Maybe he should have set it on his ground. Maybe he should have handed it back to her. Maybe. Who cares? God damn it! Why are you overthinking this? So what? He threw it over his shoulder. Who the fuck cares? It's not like, I don't know. I'm sorry. It really annoys me because I think it was perfectly fine. I don't think he should have handed it back. I don't think it matters. And I don't think it was played just for laugh. As I was saying before, like it would, like my example when I was saying, oh, Luke would be like, oh, thanks for giving me the saber. I'm going to train you. Totally against what's been set up in The Force Awakens. So all these people saying Rian Johnson, again, not opinion, you're dead wrong. He's not specifically saying, fuck you, Abrams, I'm going to undo what you did with this scene. Not at all. This was set up. This was foreshadowed in The Force Awakens that Luke had this attitude that he did not want to train Jedi. And again, that's why he said, why would I go to the hardest place to find in the galaxy if I wanted to fucking train Jedi? Ugh. Anyway, sorry about that. I'll move on a bit. So this builds into my next topic that I want to talk about, which is comedy. And I was gonna say this in my initial spoiler-free review, but it slipped my mind. I was really regretted that I didn't say it in that review as soon as I made the video, because I got a comment right away talking about the comedy, and I forgot to mention the comedy. I really wish I had, so let me talk about it now. This is something I heard even before I saw the film in like spoiler-free reviews, people complaining about the comedy being very jarring and sort of out of place, and it feels, a lot of people saying it's like a Marvel movie and they're just doing it for laughs. It's Disney-ifying Star Wars. Out of all the complaints people have, not just about this movie, but almost about any movie ever, I would say, this is the one I disagree with the most. Like, I could not disagree with this complaint more. Like, I am so on the other side. Like, I don't know. Don't want to say you're objectively wrong, because humor is subjective. Humor is a subjective thing, so I can't really say objectively you're wrong. But I'm just so, like, I would go to the other extreme and say this is the best use of humor any Star Wars, because I talked about Force Awakens in my review, how one of the things I praised about Force Awakens is its use of humor, how natural it was, how it was done way better than the original trilogy. I think it was even better in this film. I think this is, bar none, one of the best uses of humor, not just in the Star Wars movie, but almost any movie ever. It blended so well. It did not take me out of the story. It was not opaque. Like, I can't believe, like, so many people are saying this. I'm like the exact opposite. Like, I was talking to someone, I was saying how I, like, didn't even notice the humor, and they were like, well, that sounds like an insult. But maybe I didn't phrase it properly. I noticed, like, I giggled, I laughed because it was funny, but it's like, on a subconscious level. Consciously, I was so absorbed in the film and the story, and the humorous moments worked so well for the story and made so much sense that I almost didn't even register that they made a joke. And I just watched it for a second time with a conscious mind, and I was trying to look out for, okay, there are way too many jokes. So many people are saying way too many jokes. I was like counting the jokes, and I was keeping an eye out for them. They're not that many. They're hardly any. People, this is where I'm going to say you're objectively wrong. If you say there were way too many jokes. There's not that many. Objectively, there are not that many jokes. And personally, in my opinion, none of them interfere with the story, and they all blend so well. This is the best use of humor in a Star Wars movie. Period, flat, full stop, whatever. I'm sorry, this is my position. I feel I feel more strongly about this than any other disagreement I'm talking about in this video. This is what I feel most strongly about, what I'm most deadpan about. Humor in this film works 100%. Awesome. Well done. Best I've ever seen. Sorry, that's... Alright, so let me get in, we'll talk about the lightsaber thing. Like, again, I think I already talked about that. It made perfect sense for Luke's character. Moved the story along. It was about his whole, I'm not want to train you, so I don't give a fuck if they shouldn't have handed it. It takes me on the moment because he throws it. Like, I giggled, but it made perfect sense for the scene. Alright, and then there's the stuff with, like, Poe, when he's talking to Hux, and he's like, I'm holding for Hux. I can't believe people are saying that doesn't work for the story, and that takes you out of the story. Oh my god, like... That is the story. Like, I would argue if you take out that humor, then the story would be fucked. That scene wouldn't work without that humor. How can people say this? I don't get it. He was stalling. You need to have him have that scene, and the way he stalls works so much for the character. We've seen his character in The Force Awakens. That's how he's been established. He's been established to be sarcastic ass, make jokes like this. Oh my god, I can't believe people didn't like that and think it was jarring. What the fuck? And I'm sorry. What else did we get? Oh, we had the scene where BB-8 goes onto the the mini AT-AT thing that starts shooting shit towards the end of the movie to save Finn's life. I didn't see that as that funny. I mean, it's kind of funny, but in a good way, in a way that worked for the film. And I loved it. I thought that was an amazing BB-8 moment. I heard some people complain about it. Now, the one thing of humor I will say fell kind of flat to me. Oh yeah, one more thing before I get to the thing that fell flat. Another thing I just thought about, I can't believe people are complaining about, is when Rey was like, reach out with you, and she reaches out and Luke takes a little leave, and it's the Force. How can people say that's out of place or that's jarring? Oh my god, it's like, that fits so well into his character, especially as has been established in this film. If you agree or disagree with this, even if you say it's inconsistent with the original trilogy, whatever, it's consistent with how he's been established in this film and how the kind of curmudgeon that he's become and the kind of his feelings about the Force, his feelings about Rey being naive. It makes perfect sense. I don't even think of it as humor. Take the humor out and have that scene with that, blah, blah. If you say it's not fun, I'm God, it works so well, so well. I can't believe people are complaining about that. It just blows my mind. It blows it. I'm just... You might as well complain about Star Wars being set in space. What the hell? Anyway, sorry. I know humor is a subjective thing, so maybe I'm getting too off the rails here. I don't mean to, insult anyone or whatever, but this is just how I feel. So anyway, back to the humor I actually did think was a bit jarring, and that's the stuff with the caretakers of the island, where Rey would she shot the hole in the hut, and the caretakers were a bit pissed off, and then when she cut the thing with the lightsabers, it just happened to knock the thing off. Alright, I wouldn't complain about this like some people were and be like, oh, it's jarring, it took me out of the film. It didn't take me out of the film, but it didn't land. And maybe that's just my sense of humor again. Maybe that's my perspective. But, so I didn't think it was altogether necessary. The stuff with Luke milking that weird creature thingy, that was showing his daily lifestyle and how weird this island is. And so I don't even know if I'd classify that as humor. That was just weird. So again, I thought that worked amazingly well for everything. And the stuff with the casino, where that little guy was putting coins into BB-8, and then BB-8 comes and shoots it out at the guard. I liked it. I can understand if some people didn't like it, but I loved it. I thought it was great. I don't know. I'm trying to think if there are any other sort of humor moments people were complaining about, but yeah, to me, all of them worked. It was maybe just those caretaker things, the only one that felt kind of flat to me, but I wouldn't go out and complain about. There's the Porgs, because the Porgs, actually, I haven't seen many people complaining about the Porgs. It was mainly before this movie came out, a lot of people were worried about this. So many people are making such a big deal out of these things, and they're barely in the film. And I think it's great that they're barely in the film, so I think they're amazing. It's the one scene when Chewie's roasting them, and they come up looking a little sad, that was, I think most people agree that's hilarious. And then the Porgs, when all of a sudden, just when Chewie comes to save the day, and then the Porg goes, that was hilarious. That was great use of humor. So I think the use of the Porgs are fine. I think, especially compared to something like the Ewoks, Porgs, way better than Ewoks, I'll say that. I hated the Ewoks. The Ewoks was such a distraction, and well, it's not as bad as Jar Jar, because let's be clear, nothing can be as bad as Jar Jar. But and the Gungans, not just Jar Jar, but the whole Gungans, the whole I'm gonna throw up now. But so nothing can be as bad as them. But so the Ewoks are a step above the Gungans, and the Porgs are a step above the Ewoks. And what makes the Porgs so great is that they're not used very much. The Ewoks were in the movie too much. That was their main issue. Porgs, not in the movie that much. So nothing wrong with them. Alright, so let's talk about the pacing of the film, because this is one thing I kind of predicted after the first time I saw it, that people would say, oh, it's too slow. And I don't know, I wouldn't say it was a majority of people saying this, but I have heard a few people saying, oh, the stuff with Luke and Rey was too boring. The first half of the film was too boring, it was too slow paced. And I couldn't disagree more. I loved the pacing. I think it was a great character story. It's a great character. It's not like, you compare it to something like the prequels. Prequels are like a lot of like sitting and talking about, trade negotiations and shit like that. That was boring. That was not character building. The stuff we saw, especially like the entire like Luke and Rey thing, I think is golden. It's perfect. It was all like great character building. Even the stuff with like on the rebel ships as they're running away from the First Order. Also, really great character building and stuff. I knew that people would be like, "Oh, it's too slow," because I knew that they were setting a slow pace. But I loved how they did it, and I loved how. I think personally, like I've heard someone refer to the pacing of this movie as a mess. I personally would say the pacing of this movie is a masterpiece. It's probably one of my favorite things about it. It was so perfectly paced, and how it did have that moment, in the middle of the film. And it started with a really great action sequence, amazing action sequence, and then it sort of slowed down, had all these great characters, especially the Kylo Ren and Rey stuff, and beautiful character moments, and it slowed it down. And then by the end of the film, it just boom, ran action after another, and it was perfect. And then it was such a satisfying resolution. Pacing, I think, was great. So let me talk about the thing. Like universally, I think everyone and their mothers complained about. Like even people who liked the film. I've only met one person. I have a friend who saw this film. He loved it, and he was very sort of disheartened when I last saw him. He was like feeling very, can't believe all the negative things people are saying about it. He's the only other person I met who liked this, and I'm talking about the Finn and Rose stuff in Canto Bight. Now, I did mention in my spoiler-free review that this is my least favorite part of the film, and when I went and saw it the second time, it was the hardest stretch to get through this on the second viewing. It's like, that being said, I think people are being too rough on this. I don't think it sucked. I don't think it ruined the movie. I don't think it was horrible. I don't think, why is it even there? Because there's aspects to it I like. Like I said, I think some of the humor there worked, but for mostly, like, I think what it added to the story was amazing with the commentary on, how we get to see, like, a rich casino type place. This is something we hadn't seen in Star Wars before. And I heard someone say, oh, this is just, it's too much like 20th century, but with aliens. What? Everything in Star Wars, every kind of cantina scene, all this shit, everything you get is like 20th century, but aliens. But setting that aside, it had amazing, and I love how it fleshed it out. And Benicio del Toro's character in particular, a lot of people bitching about him, saying, "Oh, this character is pointless, doesn't need to be there." I think again, has that sort of gray he adds to it. Like, these are the guys you think are the bad guys because they sell weapons to the Force Order, but they're also selling weapons to you. And it's sort of saying that, and he talks about, oh, they'll hit you today, but you'll hit them tomorrow, and it's just a cycle, whatever. And it's talking about war profiteering. And I think it adds a lot of dimension, a lot of flavor to Star Wars. And this is something I liked about the prequels. It's one of the things I think the prequels actually did right better than the original trilogy, is the complexity. And it's not just good guys versus bad guys. And if that's what you want, maybe that's why, you didn't like this, because it brings in complexity. But personally, I don't think it brought the story to a halt. It was, as I said, sort of the least, I called in my review the least awesome of awesome. It was the least interesting storyline. Maybe it could have been trimmed down a little bit. It was interesting, though, that they were sent to find the specific guy who was Kevin Garvey from The Leftovers, Justin Theroux, and and they're not the guy he thought they found. They ended up going with this Benicio del Toro guy, and I kept expecting like Benicio del Toro to show the little golden leaf to say, "Oh, I'm actually the real guy, and that other guy wasn't him." But I actually kind of like that they didn't do that, because that would have been a bit cliched, a bit of a trope. If you're like, "I'm really," nah, he wasn't. He's just some random guy who just happened to be there. And they would have been better off if they had went with the actual code breaker, because they wouldn't have betrayed him like that, most likely. I don't know, just assuming. But Maz Kanata can recommend him. He's probably a better guy than the Benicio del Toro character. But anyway, I mean, that's all I had to say about that. Like, I'm just sick of hearing people complaining about it. Not because I think their complaints are invalid, but because I just don't think it was that bad. I don't think it ruined the movie. It could have been better, yes. It could have been shorter, yes. But I think it does add some flavor. And I'm actually glad to say. In fact, my friend I was talking to who loved the scene were like, but it's so great because it shows you that not all plans work. It subverts tropes in the way where, oh, you think they're going on this adventure and this plan to save the day, but they go and do it, but it doesn't save the day. Instead, they find out that the situation's a lot more dynamic than that. And from that perspective, I agree. I think it does really work in that regard. Alright, so let me move over to Rey and Kylo Ren. I don't think anyone's ever complained about this storyline. I think that even the haters gotta admit this is the best part of the movie. To me, this is the best part. This is the true gold. Although I had heard some people complain about the fight scene with Snoke, and I had talked about this, maybe because Snoke dies or whatever, but oh my god, that scene is just so good, so amazing. It's so beautifully shot too. Like, just watching it, some of the best like cinematography. It's like a work of art, that fight scene. Now, and this is another thing. Like, I read a few things online where people were complaining, oh, there's no lightsaber battles. Like, what do you mean no lightsaber battles? Like, no one-on-one lightsaber battles, because the Kylo Ren and Rey thing doesn't count, because they're fighting, 6 or 7 guys, and they have these weird, like, stripy things that aren't exactly lightsabers. I'm like, okay, fine. What about the, Kylo Ren versus Luke at the end of the movie? Well, no, that doesn't count, because Luke doesn't actually fight back. He's just an astral projection. He's just dodging, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Well, what about Finn versus, the Chrome Trooper, the Captain Phasma? Oh, no, those aren't lightsabers. Those are just little things. Those don't count either. Why are you putting so many restrictions on what? Like, why are you so goddamn specific? Like, why is it so important to see a very specific lightsaber on lightsaber battle? Why is that important to you? I don't know. Maybe, again, I should respect your opinion. It's just my opinion. I don't care. But that seems very specific. Me, personally, that fucking scene we got with Rey and Kylo Ren beat any fucking one-on-one lightsaber battle. I'd choose that over any of the other fucking lightsaber battles in the entire fucking Star Wars franchise any day of the week. That scene was fucking amazing. It was even better. Oh my god, it was so good. Especially like the revelation at the end, like Kylo Ren and Rey working together, the implications of them building this relationship, and then they kill Snoke and they both fight off these guards together, and the way they do it was such an intense, beautifully shot. I'm going to say that is the best fight sequence in the entire Star Wars franchise. Come at me. But who gives a fuck if it's one-on-one lightsaber battle? It was amazing. It was in the Luke and Kylo Ren stuff at the end. Amazing. And even the fucking Finn versus Captain Phasma was fucking amazing. Who cares if it's one-on-one? Why are you being so specific? I don't get it. I don't know. Maybe it's just my perspective or whatever. I don't have the expectations laid out. But those were way better. I love them. Love them, love them, love them. Anyway, let's move on a bit. I'm going to talk about Poe Dameron's storyline. Now, Poe, I think it's kind of funny because it wasn't a lot of people, but I did watch one specific reviewer who said that this movie made them not like Poe and Finn because of their portrayal in this movie. And it's funny because I feel the exact opposite. I didn't really like Poe and Finn that much in The Force Awakens, especially Poe. Like, Poe I thought was a very generic, I'm a, Starcraft fighter, flying the X-Wings fighter or whatever. He's very generic, resistant fighter, no sort of character other than just being a flyboy, and that really annoyed me. I thought he was very cliche, very flat. I had no reason to care about him. This movie gave him an arc, it gave him character, it gave me a reason to care about him. And with Finn, he was too much of a joke. It's funny people were saying that the jokes were jarring in this film when they're actually way more jarring in Force Awakens, especially Finn, who's going, "Whoa, get out of here," and talking like he's in the 21st century. And he doesn't do that as much in this film. His character came off as more genuine, realistic, and fit more into this world. So I love both Finn and Poe better in this film, but let me focus a bit more on Poe, because his storyline in particular was really interesting. And again, it's kind of about subverting expectations, because you think he's this, flyboy. He comes up with this plan. He's going to defy the leadership in pretty much every movie you can think of. His plan would work and save the day, and he'd be proven right, and he should do it. But they went the exact opposite direction. His plan failed, and the other plan that he was trying to interfere with from Holdo actually worked. Now, let me talk about Holdo, who's, I think, is Laura Dern. I was like, oh, it's Laura Dern. But some people are complaining about her, saying, oh, it's like a character from the Hunger Games. She has purple hair. Maybe I don't watch the Hunger Games that much, but I don't care. I think people are just finding things to complain just for the sake of complaining. But anyway, I think I was a bit iffy on her character at first, too. I was kind of like, where are they going with her? What was the point? And I think what would have upset me the most is if they went nowhere with her and her character was kind of pointless. But they didn't do that. Her character served a specific function, so I loved it. I thought it worked out very well. Now, here is where I'm going to sort of complain a bit. A little bit. Because I think the situation with Poe and Holdo is a bit different than what the movie is trying to tell me it is. Because it seems like, and maybe I'm just misinterpreting this, but it seems like the movie is trying to tell me that Poe is very hot-headed and he should have calmed down and he should have just listened to Holdo and went along with her and her plan, and everything would have been fine. And so this kind of indicated by, after she dies, when they're on the salt planet or whatever, Poe is more calm. When they're attacking that battering ram thing, he's the one that says, oh, we got to call this off. We can't be too hot-headed. And when they're evacuating the base, it's like, lives are what matter. We need to evacuate. That's more important than destroying them. And that was kind of like the overarching theme, revelation of the story. So in that regard, I think the movie was telling me that Poe should have listened to Holdo and just went along, and it was his fault, that the people died or whatever, and that they chased him. I'm going to have to disagree with the movie if that's what the movie thinks is the message is, because that's what I don't get out of it. I don't get that out of it. What I get out of it, it kind of reminds me of the Star Trek, and again, I'm such a Star Trek geek, but I'm going back to the Star Trek Voyager episode, Scorpion, where Janeway and Chakotay are facing off this impossible situation where they're stuck in Borg space, and the Borg are having this war with another unbeatable alien species who could take over the entire galaxy. And Janeway wants to make an alliance with the Borg, but Chakotay doesn't. He wants to just run and hide on the planet. And so they come to disagreement. They're constantly clashing with each other, and they're constantly failing, and they're not making any headway because they cannot work together. It's not until they learn to set their differences aside, learn to come together and work together, that they actually overcome the conflict, and they resolve the situation, and everyone save the day or whatever, and everyone's fine. So that's how they resolve everything, is by not constantly butting heads, but coming together. So that's what I think the message is. And so in that regard, I think Holdo is just as fault as Poe is. And if the movie's trying to tell me that she was in the right all along, Poe was wrong, I disagree. I think she, and some other people brought this up, she was wrong for blocking him out. And I know you can say, well, it's a military structure, she's a commander, subordinates should listen, but even if he was just demoted, Poe has a high status, and he has a lot of followers, obviously, which we can see because a lot of people mutinied with him. So it was dumb of her to disregard him. You're a hothead. You're not what required here. I don't want a hothead, so I'm not going to tell you anything. If she had let him in on the plan from the beginning and worked with him, and if she was that way at the start, then when he had his other plan with Finn, he wouldn't feel like, well, I can't trust her, so I'll have to do this behind her back. If they felt like they could work together, and she was more receptive to hearing his plan, and he might be more receptive to hearing her plan, and they work together, and that's how you resolve the situation. So that's the moral of the story. I think it is. I don't think it's that Poe is a hothead who should just listen to hold it all along. I think they're both at fault for not working with each other. But yeah, anyway, I already talked a bit about how beautiful the cinematography is. That's another thing. This is another reason why this is one of my favorite Star Wars films. This is one of the most beautiful looking films I've ever seen. It's definitely the most best cinematography as far as Star Wars films goes, hands down. Like the Kylo Ren and Rey fight scene in the sort of guard room, whatever you call it. One of the most beautifully shot, the whole color scheme. It's amazing, but what's even better was the salt planet or whatever. I know someone's going to correct me in the comments. Well, this planet is actually called... I'm sorry, too lazy to look this shit up. But anyway, on that planet where they had the salt thing and you step on it and it turns red, that was so amazing. And it's not like you could say, oh, they just did the white and red thing just to look cool. But there could have been ways where it would look cheesy or out of place or interfering with the story. But it doesn't. It actually helped the story. And it looked absolutely beautiful. Like some of these scenes with some of the shots they had overhead with the AT-ATs and stuff walking and the red and the little rebel fighters flying and spinning up red behind them. Absolutely beautiful. This is the most beautiful Star Wars film. Visually, anyway. Okay, so let's talk about Leia. And this is another thing people are complaining about her flying like a witch through space. I don't know. I don't really have strong feelings about that either way. I don't feel strong enough to defend it because I must admit I thought it was a bit cheesy as well, but I wasn't like, oh my god, that's awful, what the fuck are they doing, they're ruining Star Wars. I wasn't like that either. I was just like, okay. When she first blew out into space, I'm like, holy shit. I thought she was dead. I also thought this was a course correction they did after Carrie Fisher tragically passed away, and this is how they're writing her out of the franchise. But it's interesting they decided not to do that at all. But some people thought that scene was even more powerful, more great because of Carrie Fisher's passing. It had more of an emotional impact. I don't know about that. Some people loved it because it showed that Leia had the ability to use the Force. That's what I thought was interesting. That's what I liked about it. I liked about the scene that it was her showing that she was Force sensitive, because we haven't really established that yet in The Force Awakens. Yet her son is the one who's the super Force, Kylo Ren, and he gets his abilities from her. So it's good to actually see that side of her betrayal. Was it a bit cheesy seeing her float through space like that? Yes, I'm not going to argue, but I don't think it didn't bother me that much. I wasn't outraged by it. I'm like, fine, whatever. I didn't have really strong feelings about that either way. Overall, I liked her portrayal in this film. I thought it was really good. I especially towards the end where it sort of builds the whole character arc of Poe when she was trying to build him as a leader. And, sort of chastising him for his mistakes, being too much of a hothead towards the end when Poe says, oh, I know the way out, and everyone looks to her. She's like, what are you looking at me for? You follow him. And I love that. And, of course, seeing her reunion with Luke, also, very touching, very amazing. I think very true to the original trilogy. Very honoring it, I will say. So, overall, I liked Leia. And let me get into a bit of Captain Phasma, because people are complaining about her just like they did with The Force Awakens. And just like The Force Awakens, I'll say, I think this 100% has to do with people's expectations. I had no issues with Phasma in Force Awakens, and I had no issues with her here. I think people were like, oh, she's like played up as this big badass, and she doesn't really do anything. Oh, we're told that she's been this big badass, and she just doesn't do anything. No, she isn't. No, she's not. How she played up as a big badass? Because she's played by an actress you know from a show you like? Is it because of you saw toys of her? Is it because of like all these YouTube videos you watch? You're like, oh, look at this Trone Trooper, it looks so awesome. Again, like, and this comes to a wider like issue of how I always try to judge films on their own merits. I always try to like source material, like theories, fan reaction, whatever. I always try to block that out. Think of judge the film on its own merits, and on its own merits, if you block out all that other stuff, this is a tertiary character, like a, sort of, it's hard to explain, like the, like a boss villain. Like, say if it's like a Steven Seagal movie and you have this big bad guy and he's the main villain, and he has like all these little minions that work for him, and he has like his second in command who's just like a tertiary villain who controls all the bad guys, and he's never really appears that much. He's more of another obstacle to overcome for Steven Seagal to kill. And not just Steven Seagal, but a lot of movies do this trope, like, and it's not always the second in command, like clearly the Captain Phasma isn't a second in command, but she's like the leader of the troops. And you have some characters like that. They're never really that important. They never really do that much. They're there to be an obstacle to overcome, and that's exactly how she comes off. I mean, I don't really understand these people. You got Snoke, you got Hux, you got Kylo Ren, and you got Captain Phasma. It's like, how did they expect a 2.5 hour movie to like give you a lot on all four of these villains? Like, I don't really get it. I don't understand. I think I would say the expectations are unrealistic with her. She was always a tertiary character. Any build up or any she was supposed to be a badass, it's all in your head. It's all in supplemental material. It's not in the movie itself. The movie never claims that she's supposed to be this huge character who does a huge thing. She, from the very beginning, is like a tertiary boss, like minor boss type minion, and that's what she does, and that's what she serves. In fact, I think the fight scene between her and Finn was amazing. It blew my mind, and she was like necessary enough where she had this pre-established relationship with Finn, where Finn was, betrayed the stormtroopers or whatever on her watch, so she has a hatred toward him, and so they had this pre-established rivalry. So amazing to see them go at it and see Finn come and swipe her down. It's one of my favorite fight scenes in the movie, and I think it really worked for the film. So I loved how they used the Chrome Trooper in this film. I loved how they used Captain Phasma. I don't care that she never really did anything, because I never thought she would, because she was never presented that way. But anyway, let me get into the biggest complaint I had about this movie, because I sort of foreshadowed this when I was talking about Snoke, and it sort of feeds into what the thing that was holding this movie back the most for me, and that was the fact that it was kind of like the whole situation it was setting up, and I talked about this a bit in my spoiler-free review of the Resistance versus the First Order. They're just mirroring the original trilogy. Like, the political situations behind it is not made very clear. They're kind of just they're defaulting. And I talked about this in my spoiler-free, how they they're scared of getting into politics because of the prequels. But again, the prequel went to one extreme, and they're going to the other extreme, which they shouldn't. They should be going somewhere in the middle where they find a happy medium, like the original trilogy, where you get some explanation to the political situation, but not too much like in the prequels. And what they're doing here is, it's just like the carbon copy. It's like what's the point of the Rebel Alliance defeating the Empire in the original trilogy if the exact same thing's going to happen? And that's why I'll get to Snoke and why I said his sort of the way they didn't sort of make this character important. Just the one aspect of it that bothered me, because it says, well, he's just another emperor. That's all there is to it. He's an emperor. He doesn't really have any reason. He just came up out of nowhere. He's an emperor and created this evil empire. And there's an evil empire just like the other empire, and just created out of nowhere. And there's a reliance just like the other rebels. And there's no real... We're not going to explore that. It's just, here's the original trilogy again. No explanation. So that's the part that bothers me, and I guess that's kind of similar to some complaints people have about Snoke. That's why I said there was an aspect of it I agreed with them on, and that's this. It does seem like, and I think this is both a complaint on both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, is that they're not putting as much effort to just being like, here's the original trilogy again, and not putting as much effort to make it something original or new, saying, now explaining why things are happening the way they are, and why it's just the Empire versus Rebels all over again with no real explanation, and that bothers me. So I already talked a bit about what I hope they do with what I hope to see in episode 9. I hope that Abrams yes-ands it. That he doesn't try to undo anything established in this film. I mean, he could, like I said, maybe, except with the exception of bringing Luke back to life. That's the one thing I wouldn't really mind. Well, maybe it could just be a Force Ghost. A Force Ghost would be more. Because I did get the impression from this film that this isn't the last we've seen of Luke. So if we don't see him as a Force Ghost, at the very least, I'll be very disappointed. But I really don't think Abrams is going to come in and be like, no, I'm going to undo this. But if he yes-ands it, if he says, okay, I'm not going to undo anything you did with Snoke, but I'm going to reveal that he did have this backstory and it's relevant to the story going forward. Oh, good. That's great. I hope he does that kind of stuff. And even if he doesn't even say, okay, I'll just write Snoke off because he's not relevant to the story. What I don't want him to do is, oh no, Snoke didn't really die because the lightsaber coming to half with this weird thing brought him back to life and he's coming back and ruling over. That is what I hope they don't do, something like that, just as an example, because this movie set up a situation where Kylo Ren is the Supreme Chancellor. He's the one in charge, which really sets it apart from all the other Star Wars films. So I hope he yes-ands that, builds off of that. And if he wants to sort of undo some of the minor details about Snoke, so, oh, well, he was actually this guy and he's relevant going forward, but he's still dead, perfectly fine. So that's what I'm hoping from episode 9. But to be honest, again, like I said, I'm more looking forward to Rian Johnson, because Rian Johnson won me over with this film. I am a huge Rian Johnson fan. If you don't know, he's directed the very best episode of Breaking Bad and the very worst episode of Breaking Bad. The very best episode, Ozymandias, and the very worst, Fly. He's directed both of them. But anyway, I love the work. He's directed other great episodes of Breaking Bad. His movies, I can take him or leave him. Brick was okay. Looper was good. It was a good movie. I really loved it at first until all the time travel logic really started getting on my nerves. But this is, I think, the best movie I've seen from him, honestly. So I am really looking forward to see what he does with this new trilogy, and I thought he did an amazing job with this film. Anyway, so my rating for Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, out of 10 is a 9. Excellent. Amazing film. I love it. As I said, this is my second favorite Star Wars film. I think it was way better than Force Awakens because it was way original. It went in its own direction. It had very clear character arcs, helped build the character stories. It had amazing payoff with the Rey and Kylo Ren storyline. The whole way that was built and built up to where he thought they would sort of come together, but he wanted him to come together on the dark side, and she wanted them to come together on the light side, so they ended up as adversaries. Amazing. The whole Luke dynamic of him having to come to terms with what does Jedi Order mean? Does it deserve to die? And at the end, when he just says to Kylo Ren, it's like, and if you kill me, I will not be the last Jedi. That brought tears to my eyes. The whole construction payoff was beautifully paced, beautifully structured movie. The Candy Bite stuff, okay, it could have been shorter. Maybe it was the least interesting out of all the stuff, but I don't think it totally sucked. I don't think it made the movie totally suck. I thought the humor was the best humor ever in a Star Wars movie. That's my final word on that. And the cinematography was freaking amazing. Again, the best I've ever seen in the Star Wars movie. So yes, I'll give it a 9 instead of a 10 because, as I said, I did have some issues with the overarching political setup of good versus evil. Just they didn't give any thought into the here's the original trilogy again. Don't think too much about it. So that's what holds it back for 10 for me. But other than that, loved it. Great movie. 9 out of 10. So that is it for my spoilers review. Star Wars The Last Jedi. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you should check out my channel for many other videos I do on shows like Star Trek, Game of Thrones, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.